They say that some cities are born blessed, kissed by the gods, lifted high by destiny, shining like jewels upon the earth. But others are born to fall, and none burned brighter or perished more completely than Troy. Rising from the shores of Asia Minor, Troy was a city of majesty and might, its walls towering as if carved by the hands of gods themselves. Traders filled its markets, warriors guarded its gates. Priam, the noble king, ruled with wisdom. To all who saw it, Troy was eternal. But destiny had written otherwise, for from its very foundations, Troy bore a curse, whispered by oracles, sealed by divine hands, and carried by the pride of men. It began with a prophecy, a warning of fire and ruin, a vision that no mortal could escape. On the day Paris, son of Priam, was born, the seer spoke. This child will be the ruin of Troy. Fear clutched the king's heart. The boy was sent away, abandoned to die. But fate cannot be outrun. Paris lived, and with his survival, the curse was set in motion. For in the games of gods and men, it is not strength that determines the end, but destiny. And destiny had chosen Troy. This is the tale of a city that defied the will of the heavens, a city cursed from its very birth, a city doomed to burn. This is the fall of Troy. Paris grew to manhood far from Troy's shining walls, a prince unknowing of his bloodline, living as a shepherd upon Mount Ida. But the gods knew who he was, and they would soon make him their pawn. It began with a wedding, a union destined for strife. When Peleus took Thetis, a sea goddess, to be his bride, all the gods of Olympus gathered to celebrate, all but one. Eris, goddess of strife, had been cast aside. In vengeance, she hurled into the feast a golden apple, inscribed with 3 fateful words, "To the fairest." At once, discord filled the banquet hall. Hera, queen of the gods, claimed the apple. Athena, goddess of wisdom, seized it. Aphrodite, goddess of beauty, demanded it, and none would yield. The quarrel reached Zeus himself, but the king of the gods would not choose between them. Instead, he turned to a mortal, a young shepherd, Paris of Troy. Before him stood the 3 goddesses, each desperate for his favor. Hera promised power, dominion over the world. Athena offered wisdom and victory in battle. But Aphrodite, she offered the love of the most beautiful woman in the world, a woman whose beauty was said to rival the goddesses themselves. And so, Paris chose Aphrodite. The apple was hers, and with it, the doom of Troy was sealed. For the woman promised to him was Helen, queen of Sparta, already wed to King Menelaus. What began as a divine quarrel would soon engulf nations. For Paris' choice was not a gift, it was a curse that would bring fire to his father's kingdom and blood to every shore touched by Troy's name. When Paris returned to Troy, he came not as a shepherd, but as a prince. Priam, his father, welcomed him with open arms, unaware that the child once cast away had returned carrying the doom of his kingdom. Soon, Paris journeyed across the Aegean to the halls of Sparta. There, he gazed upon Helen, the woman Aphrodite had promised him. Her beauty was a light too radiant to behold, a flame that drew him closer, even as it threatened to consume him. And so, whether by persuasion or by force, Paris carried Helen from her husband's house. Together, they sailed for Troy, their sails cutting through the darkened sea. Behind them, in Sparta, the storm was already rising. When Menelaus discovered the betrayal, His fury shook the very foundations of Greece. For Helen had long been desired by kings and princes, and all who sought her hand had sworn an oath that if ever she were taken, they would stand together to reclaim her. And so the call went out. From every city-state, from Mycenae, Ithaca, Salamis, Pylos, and beyond, warriors gathered. Agamemnon, king of Mycenae and brother of Menelaus, took command. Odysseus of Ithaca, cunning and wise, came with his ships. Achilles, the son of Thetis, the greatest warrior the world had ever known, was summoned to battle. 1,000 ships were launched, all bound for Troy. From the folly of one prince, from the promise of one goddess, the fate of empires was now entwined. The sea boiled with war, and the curse upon Troy began to stare in full. The black ships of Greece darkened the horizon, 1,000 sails carried by the winds of vengeance. The Achaean host set foot upon Trojan shores, and the war that would echo through eternity began. For 9 long years, the Greeks stormed the plains of Troy, yet the city stood unbroken, its walls too mighty, its defenders too fierce. Heroes rose on both sides, and the gods themselves bent the course of battle. Hector, son of Priam, was Troy's shield, a warrior, noble and unyielding, who fought not for glory, but for his wife, for his child, for his doomed city. His spear struck down countless foes, and his courage lit the hearts of his people. Against him rose Achilles. Born of a goddess, he was fire incarnate, swift as the wind, unstoppable in battle. But his pride was as great as his strength, and his anger turned first upon his own. When insulted by Agamemnon, Achilles withdrew, and the Greeks faltered without him. The war became not only a conquest of armies, but a chessboard for the gods. Athena guided Greek spears, Hera schemed with cunning, and Apollo stood beside Troy, raining plagues upon the Greeks. Poseidon shook the earth, and even mighty Zeus, though sworn to neutrality, allowed fate to weave its course. For every hero who fell, another rose. Blood soaked the soil, and the cries of the dying carried to the heavens. Yet Troy endured, but endurance was not salvation, for the course was still unfolding, and the storm had only begun. The war dragged on, and pride poisoned even the greatest of men. Achilles, insulted by Agamemnon, still withheld his sword. The Greeks faltered, their warriors falling one by one beneath the spears of Troy, and at the head of their ruin stood Hector, noble, unbreakable, the very heartbeat of the city. But in the Greek camp, one man could not bear to see his people perish. Patroclus, dearest companion of Achilles, begged to fight in his stead. He donned the armor of Achilles, and for a moment, hope returned to the Greeks. The Trojans, seeing what they believed to be the great warrior himself, faltered. Patroclus drove them back, his courage blazing brighter than flame. Yet fate is merciless. Hector met him upon the field, and though Patroclus fought valiantly, he fell beneath Hector's spear. The ground shook with his dying cry, and with him, the doom of Troy drew nearer. When word reached Achilles, grief shattered his pride. He wept, he raged, and then he swore vengeance. His wrath burned hotter than the sun, and all the gods knew none could stand before him. He returned to battle like a storm unchained. Armor gleamed, eyes blazed, his spear struck like lightning. The Trojans fled before him as grass bends before fire. None could resist, not even Hector. Before the walls of Troy, the two greatest warriors met. Prince against demigod, honor against fury. They clashed beneath the gaze of gods and men. Hector fought bravely, But fate had chosen its victor. Achilles struck him down, and as Troy's women wailed, he defiled Hector's body, dragging it behind his chariot in unrelenting fury. Troy mourned its champion, its shield now broken. And though Achilles' rage had been quenched in blood, the curse had only deepened. For even he could not escape fate, and his own doom now loomed upon the horizon. Achilles had slain Hector, but even the mightiest warrior cannot outrun his fate. For the gods had whispered from the moment of his birth, if he went to Troy, he would win glory everlasting, but his life would be cut short. And so it was. As the war ground on, Paris, guided by Apollo himself, loosed an arrow that found the one weakness of the demigod. It struck Achilles in the heel, and the greatest warrior of Greece fell, his cry echoing across the plain. With him, the heart of the Achaean host seemed broken, but the Greeks were not yet finished. Odysseus, the cunning king of Ithaca, wove schemes where strength had failed. He knew Troy could not be taken by force, for its walls were built by the hands of gods. Only trickery could succeed. And so he devised a plan, a weapon not of bronze or fire, but of guile. A wooden horse, vast and hollow, crafted as an offering to the gods. The Greeks pretended to abandon the war, sailing away beneath the horizon, leaving the horse as a gift of surrender. The Trojans, weary after 10 years of siege, beheld the horse with wonder and suspicion. Some counseled to burn it, others to cast it into the sea. Yet fate had already chosen its part. For standing among them was Cassandra. Cursed with the gift of prophecy, she cried out, "It is death. Within these gifts hides ruin." But none believed her. Instead, the horse was dragged within the walls. Songs of triumph filled the air. Fires of celebration lit the night. Troy rejoiced, believing at last the curse had been broken. But in truth, it had only reached its final act. The night fell over Troy, thick with music and laughter. The people feasted, believing the war was over. They sang songs of victory, lit fires of triumph, danced in the shadow of the horse, never knowing that doom stood waiting in its hollow heart. As the city slept, the trap was sprung. In silence, a hidden door opened. From within the horse, Greek warriors slipped into the night. Odysseus, Menelaus, and others chosen for their cunning and strength. They crept across the darkened streets, striking down guards, throwing open the gates. Then, from the sea, the black ships returned. The Greek army, hidden beyond the horizon, now surged ashore. The gates of Troy were flung wide, and the invaders poured in. The city awoke to screams and fire. The sword claimed all without mercy, the young, the old, the mighty, the weak. Priam, the aged king, sought refuge at the altar of Zeus within his palace, but even there, no sanctuary remained. Neoptolemus, son of Achilles, cut him down where he knelt. Blood stained the very stones of the gods. Cassandra was seized, her warnings silenced forever, dragged away as a slave. And in the burning ruins, Andromache, wife of Hector, was torn from her child, while little Astyanax, the last hope of Troy's line, was hurled from the walls to his death. Every street became a river of flame. The walls that had once defied the might of Greece now crumbled in smoke and ash. The proud towers of Priam's house collapsed in thunder, burying centuries of glory beneath ruin. And so, as the prophecy had foretold, Troy burned, a city cursed from birth, undone not by the strength of its enemies, but by the will of fate itself. When dawn broke over the smoking ruins, Troy was no more. Its proud towers had fallen, its gates shattered, its people slain or enslaved. The songs of its glory were drowned in the cries of the conquered. The curse had been fulfilled. Cassandra's warnings ignored. Priam's house extinguished. The walls that even the gods once built reduced to rubble. What remained was ash. Yet from those ashes, fragments of destiny survived. Aeneas, cousin of Hector, carrying his aged father upon his back and leading his son by the hand, fled through the flames. Guided by the gods, he escaped the slaughter, bearing with him the seed of a new empire. For from his blood, Rome itself would one day rise. But for most, there was no salvation. Andromache was dragged into slavery. Hecuba, queen of Troy, lived only to see her children slain. The women of the city became spoils of war, their laments carried to foreign shores. The Greeks, though victorious, found no true triumph, for the wrath of the gods followed them home. Agamemnon was murdered upon his return. Odysseus wandered for years, cursed upon the sea. Even the mighty Menelaus gained back Helen, but never peace. Thus it was revealed, Troy was not the only one cursed. All who touched its fate were marked by suffering. For in the game of gods and men, no mortal emerges unscarred. And so Troy burned, but it did not vanish. Its story endured, carved in memory, sung in poems, whispered through ages. The Iliad, the Aeneid, the legends of men and gods, all born from that night of fire. Troy became more than a city. It became a warning eternal. For every empire that rises in pride, for every kingdom that believes itself eternal, Troy waits, a shadow in the ashes, whispering, "Remember me."